Let me start again. So welcome to this session of SVT Dharma Talks. And we're just going to pay respects to the Buddha. So Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at an interesting sutta, which brings through the primacy of working not only with the mind, but also with the body. And how when either one or other is overemphasized, it brings imbalance in the practice. So thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Vasali in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Now, on that occasion, when it was morning, the Blessed One had finished dressing and had taken his bowl and outer robe, desiring to go into Vasali for alms. Then, as Saccaka, the Nagantha's son, was walking and wandering for exercise, he came to the hall with the peaked roof in the great wood. The Venerable Ananda saw him coming in the distance and said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, here comes Saccaka, the Nagantha's son, a debater and a clever speaker regarded by many as a saint. He wants to discredit the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It would be good if the Blessed One would sit down for a while out of compassion." Now, Saccaka was a follower of a different sect, and there are a number of occasions in the suttas where he debates with the Buddha, bringing a different perspective. And through the process of debate, the Buddha has the opportunity to describe some fine points of the teaching. And this is another case of that. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready. Then Saccaka, the Nagantha's son, went up to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, "Master Gotama, there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of body, but not development of mind. They are touched by bodily painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by bodily painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, hot blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, go out of one's mind. So then the mind was subservient to the body, and the body wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the mind was not developed. So here we're describing a practice based on the body, but when the uncomfortable feelings come and the challenging circumstances of the practice, then there's, if you like, no balance in the response. But then there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. They are touched by mental painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by mental painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, one's blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, out of one's mind. So here, what Saccaka is saying is that when the mind is just developed, we have the same difficulty when there are painful mental feelings, that there's a very challenging body response. So then the body was subservient to the mind. The mind wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the body was not developed. Master Gotama, it has occurred to me, surely Master Gotama's disciples abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. So what Saccaka's saying here is that if simply the mind is developed or simply the body is developed, there are these problems. And he's making an assumption that the Buddha's teaching is solely about the development of mind. But Agavasena, what have you learned about development of body? So Agavasena here, it's, I think, is another name for Saccaka. Well, there are, for example, and he goes through a list of other ascetics who have mortifying practices for the body. So what he's describing here is how the body you can do certain practices within the body of denying it food, denying breathing, holding it in one position, all of these different ascetic practices. And particularly in this example, he's talking about restricting food. So they live on one saucerful a day or two saucerfuls a day, on 7 saucerfuls a day. They take food once a day, once every 2 days, once every 7 days, or even up to once every fortnight. They dwell pursuing the practice of taking food at stated intervals. So he's describing a set of practices here. And then the Buddha asks, but do they subsist on so little, Agavasena? No, Master Gotama. Sometimes they consume excellent hard food, eat excellent soft food, taste excellent delicacies, drink excellent drinks. Thereby they again regain their strength, fortify themselves, and become fat. So what the Buddha's identified here is that these are not practices that are sustainable. They're done for a short period, and then there's a period of recovery. So what they earlier abandoned in terms of food, they later gather together again. That is how there is increase and decrease of this body. But what have you learned about development of mind? So Agavasena has described this development of body, and the Buddha is interested to want to know what he knows about developing the mind. Then Saccaka the Ganthasan was asked by the Blessed One about the development of mind, and he was unable to answer. Then the Blessed One told him, what you have just spoken of as development of body, Agavasena, is not development of body according to the Dharma of the Noble Ones. Since you do not know what development of body is, how could you know what development of mind is? So what he's saying here is that you've got a particular view about the development of body. It's not the teaching of the Buddha. So if you didn't recognize what development of the body was in the terms of the Buddha, how would you recognize if the Buddha was teaching development of mind, which he claimed, Agavasena claimed, wasn't happening? Nevertheless, Agavasena, as to how one is undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind, and developed in body and developed in mind, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, sir, Saccaka the Ganthasan replied, and the Blessed One said this. How, Agavasena, is one undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind? Here, Agavasena, pleasant feeling arises in an untaught ordinary person. Touched by that pleasant feeling, they lust after pleasure and continue to lust after pleasure. That pleasant feeling of theirs ceases, and with the cessation of that pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises, because we don't want pleasant feeling to cease. So we get upset when it doesn't last. Touched by that painful feeling, they sorrow, grieve, and lament. They weep, beat their breast, and become distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in them, it invades their mind and remains, because body is not developed. So here the Buddha's, here the Buddha is identifying that in order to deal with pleasant feeling and the loss of pleasant feeling, we need the development of body. And when that painful feeling has arisen in that person, it invades their mind and remains because mind is not developed. Anyone in whom, in this double manner, a risen pleasant feeling invades their mind and remains because body is not developed, and a risen painful feeling invades their mind and remains because mind is not developed, is thus undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind. So the body is key to working with pleasant feeling, and the mind is key to working with unpleasant feeling. And how, Agavasana, is one developed in body and developed in mind? Here, pleasant feeling arises in a well-taught noble disciple. Touched by that pleasant feeling, they do not lust after pleasure or continue to lust after pleasure. So they don't lust in the first and they don't continue to lust. That pleasant feeling of theirs ceases. With the cessation of the pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. With the cessation of pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. Touched by that painful feeling, they do not sorrow, grieve, and lament. They do not weep, beating their breast and become distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in them, it does not invade their mind and remain because body is developed. And when that painful feeling has arisen in them, it does not invade their mind and remain because mind is developed. Anyone in whom this double manner, arisen pleasant feeling, does not invade their mind and remain because body is developed, and arisen painful feeling does not invade their mind and remain because mind is developed, is thus developed in body and developed in mind. So it's very clear. If we're to get a handle on pleasant feeling, we have to be able to work through the body. And if we're going to get a handle on unpleasant feeling, we're going to have to work through the mind. And these need to be together. I have confidence in Master Gautama thus. Master Gautama is developed in body and developed in mind. Now, this is a very tongue-in-cheek comment by Saccaka, because he's basically disbelieving in what the Buddha is saying. Surely, Agavasena, your words are offensive and discourteous, but I will answer you. Since I shaved off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and went forth from home into the homeless life, it has not been possible for a risen pleasant feeling to invade my mind and remain, or for a risen painful feeling to invade my mind and remain. So what's very important to recognize here is the Buddha is not saying that he does not have pleasant feeling and he does not have unpleasant feeling. We're not in charge of whether there is a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. What we are in charge of is what we do with that pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. Has there never arisen in Master Gautama a feeling so pleasant that it could invade your mind and remain? Has there never arisen in Master Gautama a feeling so painful that it could not invade your mind and remain? So here there's skepticism. Basically, Agavasena can't conceive that there couldn't be either a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling that wouldn't, if you like, hijack the mind and get us caught up in a round of thinking and pondering and the dukkha that creates. Why not, Agavasena? Here, Agavasena, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy, while living in a home, to lead the holy life, utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and go forth from the home life into homelessness. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessings of youth in the prime of life, Though my mother and father wished otherwise and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and went forth from home life into homelessness. Having gone forth, students, in search of what was wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Alara Kalama and said to him, "Friend Kalama, I want to lead the holy life in this Dharma and discipline." Alara Kalama replied, "The Venerable One may stay here. This Dharma is such that a wise man who can soon enter upon and abide in it, realizing for himself through direct knowledge his own teacher's doctrine. I soon quickly learned that Dharma, as far as mere lip reciting and rehearsal of his teaching went. I could speak with knowledge and assurance, and I claimed, I know and see, and there were others who did likewise." So here's a description of a style of teaching which is about what we might call in present parlance learning scripts. So learning how to describe states of mind, how to describe practices. But the suggestion here is that it's not necessarily a personal knowledge. But then the Buddha goes on to describe something else. I considered it is not through mere faith alone that Alara Kalama declares, "By realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I enter upon and abide in this Dharma." Certainly, Alara Kalama abides knowing and seeing this Dharma. So this is not just lip reciting and rehearsal, but this is a lived experience. Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, in what way do you declare that by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge, you enter upon and abide in this Dharma?" In reply, he declared the base of nothingness. So now he's describing a real experience, the base of nothingness. And we might know that in the practice as seventh jhāna. I considered not only Alara Kalama has faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. I too have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Suppose I endeavor to realize the Dharma that Alara Kalama declares he enters upon and abides in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge. So the Buddha now decides to move away from just mere lip reciting and rehearsal into actual personal experience. I soon quickly entered upon and abided in that Dharma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, is it in this way that you declare that you enter upon and abide in this Dharma by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge?" So he's describing his personal experience, rather similar to the interviews that we might have on retreat. "That is the way, friend. It is in this way, friend, that I also enter upon and abide in this Dharma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. It is a gain for us, friend. It is a great gain for us that we have such a venerable one for our companion in the holy life. So the Dharma that I declare, I enter upon and abide in by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, is the Dharma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge." So he's comparing his practice as being identical with the Buddha's practice. "And the Dharma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge is the Dharma that I declare I enter upon and abide in by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. So you know the Dharma that I know, and I know the Dharma that you know. As I am, so you are. As you are, so am I. Come, friend, let us now lead this community together." Thus, Alara Kalama, my teacher, placed me, his pupil, on an equal footing with himself and awarded me the highest honor. But it occurred to me, this Dharma does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana, but only to the reappearance in the base of nothingness. So here we have the Buddha has now developed the capacity to move through the jhanas and to reside in the base of nothingness. But what he's saying is that these jhanas of themselves do not lead to the knowledge and understanding that he was looking for. And being able to repeatedly go into these different states is not taking him further forward. Not being satisfied with that Dharma, disappointed with it, I left. And so he cast his mind around for other teachers, and he came across Uddaka Ramaputra. And he went through the same process with Uddaka Ramaputra. And what's important to recognize with Uddaka Ramaputra is that he was heading up a group who had previously followed his father. And his father's capacity had been to experience and abide in the state of neither perception and non-perception. And so the Buddha went through the same process, deciding that not only the lips recital and memorization of the teaching, but actual physical progress. And got to the point where, friend, in what way did Rama declare that by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, he entered upon and abided in this Dharma? In reply, Uddaka Ramaputra declared the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And the Buddha decided to practice and do the same. And I soon entered upon and abided in the Dharma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. Then I went to Uddaka Ramaputra and asked him, friend, was it in this way that Rama declared that he entered upon and abided in the Dharma by realizing for himself with direct knowledge? That is the way, friend. It is in this way, friend, that I also enter upon and abide in this Dharma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. It is a game for us, friend. It is a great game for us that we have such a venerable one for our companion in the holy life. So the Dharma that Rama declared he entered upon and abided in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge is the Dharma that you, Master Gautama, enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge. And the Dharma that you enter upon and abide by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge is the Dharma that Rama declared he entered upon and abided in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge. So you know the Dharma that Rama knew, and Rama knew the Dharma that you know. As Rama was, so you are. As you are, so was Rama. Come, friend, now lead this community. So he's been offered to be the head of this community because Uddaka Ramaputra doesn't have this same capacity. But the Buddha has emulated the capacity of his father, Rama. But it occurred to me, this Dharma does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. But only to reappearance in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Not being satisfied with that Dharma, disappointed with it, I left. Still in search, students, of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I wandered by stages through the Magadhan country until eventually I arrived at Uruvela, at Senanagama. There I saw an agreeable piece of ground, a delightful grove, with a clear flowing river with pleasant smooth banks, and a nearby village for alms resort. I considered, this is an agreeable piece of ground. This is a delightful grove, with a clear flowing river with pleasant smooth banks, and nearby a village for alms resort. This will serve for the striving of a clansman intent on striving. And I sat down there thinking, this will serve for striving. Now, these three similes occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agavasena? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying in the water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, and it is lying in water. Eventually, the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agavasena, as to those recluses and Brahmins who still do not live bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures and whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the first simile that occurred to me spontaneously. So when we've got that wet, sappy piece of wood, what we've got is that we're not developing the body. And how do we know we're not developing the body? Because we're all of the physical, sensual sense impressions coming in through the body are invading the mind. And so the practice of a bodily meditation needs to be able to address that, because without that, it's like the wood is completely wet. There's no possibility of generating the fire. And again, Agavasana, excuse me, a second simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there was a wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agavasana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, and even though it is lying on dry land, far from water, eventually the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agavasana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. Even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if they don't feel these feelings, strong feelings, they're also incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. So what's the difference between the first and the second of these similes? Well, the first one, the stick was in the water. So the water was not being bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures. And the wet stick was the fact that there was still sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures. So it's an external and an internal. And the Buddha said, excuse me, it's not enough simply to withdraw from the external sensual pleasures, if you like, if the internal, if the mind has not been addressed. So here we have the external, the physical, and the internal, the mental. Again, Agavasana, a third simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agavasana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by rubbing it against the dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? Yes, Master Gotama. Why so? Because it is a dry, sapless piece of wood, and it is lying on dry land, far from water. So too Agavasana. As to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures, whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. These are the three similes that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. So what we have here is a withdrawing of our senses. Now, what does that mean? It means that we're not letting the senses run out towards the object. It doesn't mean that we're not seeing things that are pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant. But when the mind runs out towards these things, when we engage with the delight, if you like, of a visual object and hold on to it, and we become entranced with its form and its features, then then the mind, the sensory experience is one of clinging, of holding on. And what the Buddha's describing here is that, is there a way of being with the senses where we can still experience all that's going on without this clinging being present? And of course, what the Buddha is describing, excuse me, is how can we simply see something for itself without laying on top all of our attachments and aversions that come from past experience or an expectation? Well, this is classic craving. And what Bhante Viramsci described as working with craving was to use the 6 R's. When we notice the mind is getting pulled out, when we notice that we're leaning into the experience, we recognize that we've moved away from the position of balance, the wholesome feeling. And balance is the wholesome, and we've moved into the unwholesome. And Bhante Viramsci very helpfully described the unwholesome as anything, any experience that we take personally. And when we take something personally, we make it me, we make it mine, or we make it my own. And so what's accompanied with that owning of the experience is this tension. And so the 6 R's are about recognizing that we've been drawn in this way. The experience has become unwholesome because we've taken it personally. To recognize that's happened, to release away from that attachment. And that means that we don't feed it with our attention. And instead of feeding it with our attention, we use that attention to become aware of any tension and tightness around our brain or in our body. And what we want to do is we want to come back into balance. And what Bhante Viramsci described is, well, release around this tension. And what we would do in the Saccaka Yoga is invite you to come back into the energetic body and relax into the body, because that deep relaxing into the energetic support is a very thorough releasing of the tension of craving. So it helps us recognize how to release that, how to be in a place without the tension. And then the next R of the 6 R's is to smile, re-smile, and return back to whatever we were doing. In a formal meditation, that might be coming back to the object of attention, or in daily life, it might be whatever we were engaging with before we got distracted. Okay, so we're talking about the two dry, sapless pieces of wood and being far from water. So to Agavasana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures, whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. Even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. Because those painful, racking feelings, they're aversion. That's the other side of craving, of wanting, is not wanting. Aversion, it's a pushing away. And if they're in balance, they don't push away and they don't hold on. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment in these conditions as well. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. These are the three similes that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. I thought, suppose with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. So, with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrained, and crushed mind with mind. While I did so, excuse me, sweat ran from my armpits, just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him. So too, with my teeth clenched and my tongue suppressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrained, and crushed mind with mind. So we have to be very careful about this, okay? Because although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. Such painful striving that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. So here, the Buddha is using, if you like, the power of the mind to suppress the mind. And the Buddha is saying that although this does produce unremitting mindfulness, it leads to exhaustion. So it's not a sustainable practice. It's actually a practice of consumption of energy because we become exhausted. So what's going to be described here now is a whole series of ascetic practices that the Buddha went through, trying to find a way of releasing away from this craving. And they're practices of trying to control the mind, either by directly suppressing it, by this beating mind with mind, or through extreme ascetic practices in the body. So I thought, suppose I practice the breathingless meditation, stopping in-breaths and out-breaths. So he practiced this way. And he practiced it to a whole extreme, but he remained exhausted again. Suppose I practiced further the breathingless meditation, so I stopped in-breaths and out-breaths through my mouth, nose, and ears. And what he experienced was violent winds through the head. But although unremitting mindfulness was aroused, my body was overwrought, uncalm, because I was exhausted by the painful striving. Such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. So the mindfulness was very clear. The exhaustion was because of the overstriving, but his mind wasn't disturbed by that because there was a stillness in the mind. Then I thought, suppose I practice further the breathingless meditation. And so he completely gave up breathing for very long periods. But he found also that this didn't work, that the mind became, there was unremitting mindfulness and tireless energy, But my mind was my body became overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted. So here's an imbalance in practice between the mind and the body. And he extended the practice of withholding breath even further, to the point where, again, his mind was completely present, and the mindfulness was unremitting, and the energy was tireless, but he again was still exhausted with the painful striving. So I'm just abbreviating this because it's a very long sutta. And he went on again to practice breath retention. There was a violent burning in my body, and tireless energy was aroused in me, unremitting mindfulness. But again, I was exhausted by the painful striving. So here we see that through this progression of practice, the Buddha is defining the nature of striving, that striving should not be painful, that the practice shouldn't lead to a mortification of the body. So now he's at the point where he's not breathing and potentially not going to explore not eating food. Now, when the deities saw me, some said the recluse Gautama is dead. Other deities said the recluse Gautama is not dead, he is dying. Another deity said the recluse Gautama is not dead or dying, he is an arahant, for such is the way of arahants and how they live. I thought, suppose I practice entirely cutting off food. Then the deities came to me and said, good sir, do not practice entirely cutting off food. If you do so, we shall infuse heavenly food into the pores of your skin, and you will live on that. I considered, if I claim to be completely fasting whilst these deities infuse heavenly food into the pores of my skin, and I live on that, then I shall be lying. So I dismissed those deities, saying, there is no need. I thought, suppose I take very little food, a handful at a time. And then his body reached a state of complete extreme emaciation because of eating so little. And then he decided to reduce the amount he was eating even more. And to the extent that his body was extremely painful, and that anybody looking at him would have considered him to be near death. Now, when people saw me, some said, the recluse Gautama is black. Other people said, the recluse Gautama is not black, he is brown. Other people said, the recluse Gautama is neither black nor brown, he is golden skinned. So much had the clear, bright color of my skin deteriorated through eating so little. And then I reflected, whatever recluses or Brahmins in the past have experienced painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost. There is none beyond this. And whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will experience painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost. There is none beyond this. And whatever recluses and Brahmins at present experience painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, this is the utmost. There is none beyond this. But by this racking practice of austerities, I have not attained any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Could there be another path to enlightenment? So what the Buddha is describing here is the extremes that we can go in ways of working with the body. I recall that when my father, the Sakyan, was occupied while I was sitting in the cool shade of the rose apple tree, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhāna, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Could that be the path to enlightenment? Then following on that memory came the realization that is indeed the path to enlightenment. I thought, why am I afraid of that pleasure that has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unwholesome states? I thought, I am not afraid of that pleasure, since it has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unwholesome states. So here the Buddha is describing the pleasure born of the jhanas. Now, why are the jhanas, or that pleasure, unwholesome? Wholesome. They're wholesome because the jhanas are states of mind that do not have the hindrances in. So they're purified of the hindrances. And so the joy that comes up is a natural consequence of the release of the hindrances. And so there can't be attachment to it, because attachment is one of the hindrances. So this attachment or aversion, this attachment to sensory experience, and the quality of the jhana itself is a natural consequence of being in that state. So it's not that we choose to be in joy, but that we choose as we go through the jhanas that joy arises. Now, it doesn't mean that the jhanas can't be distractions. Because if we become delighted in that joy, okay, so we then take an attribute of the jhana and make it the object of our attention. Well, the Buddha said, if you're going to do that, the jhanas, the hindrances are not present when you're doing that, but you won't progress any further because you've taken an aspect of the jhana as your object of attention. Whereas when we work with the jhanas in the twin practice, we're working with the aware jhanas. The jhanas are merely signposts. They're not the destination of our practice. So we use the Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness, the compassion, the sympathetic joy, and the equanimity. And as we go through working with the loving kindness, we will enter in by using the 6 R's to purify the mind, to release from the hindrances. We will progressively move through the jhanas themselves. But we simply use these as waymarks, as pointers to the direction we're going, rather than hold on to the experience itself. I considered, excuse me, it is not easy to attain that pleasure with the body so excessively emaciated. So I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and porridge, and I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and porridge. And now at the time, 5 students were waiting upon me, thinking, if our recluse Gotama achieves some higher state, he will inform us. But when I ate the boiled rice and porridge, those 5 students were disgusted and left me, thinking, the recluse Gotama now lives luxuriously. He has given up his striving and reverted to luxury. So even someone who is so devoted to the practice is subject to judgment and commentary and measurement by others. Now, when I had eaten solid food and regained my strength, then quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by what's described here as applied and sustained thought, or thinking and examining thought, with rapture and pleasure. We might call that joy, born of seclusion. But such pleasant feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. So Why does it not invade the mind and remain? Well, because of the nature of the striving. Yeah. This is right effort. So when we see these things come up, we just 6R. We recognize they're there, we release, we relax, we smile, come back into balance, and come back to the object of our attention, which might be the Brahma Vihara, loving kindness, for instance. Because we're constantly doing that in the practice with anything that the mind is tempted to take forward, to lean into, then we're constantly bringing the mind back into balance. And when we bring the mind into balance, then whatever is occurring does not invade our mind and remain. With the stilling of initial and applied thought, or thinking and examining thought, I entered upon and abided in the second jhāna, and worked the same way. With the fading away of rapture, which is a characteristic of the second jhāna, this sense of uplifting joy, I entered upon and abided in the third jhāna. Now, the third jhāna has mindfulness and equanimity. And it's a deeply pleasant state. But again, the pleasant state does not invade the mind. It doesn't form an attachment if we preserve the right striving. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, I entered upon and abided in the fourth jhāna, which has equanimity and mindfulness present. So the equanimity is this sense of balance. And it's balanced because things are neither pleasant nor unpleasant. With such pleasant feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. So when my concentrated mind, the collected mind, was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to knowledge of the recollection of past lives. So this is Buddha's verification of past lives in his development movement from being a bodhisattva to the Buddha. And this was the first true knowledge attained by me at the first watch. When my collectedness was thus purified, bright and unblemished, and rid of imperfection, and malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. So this is the verification of karma, seeing that the choices that we make, the actions that we take, because karma itself means action, that again informs the next moment. And that can be on a moment-by-moment basis in our daily lives, but also we can think of dependent origination as being one lifetime to the next, if that's what we have sympathy around. And what the Buddha is describing here is seeing the conditioning that comes from action and how it reinforms that rebirth process. And this was the second true knowledge attained by me in the middle watch of the night. When my collected mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, and rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to knowledge of the destruction of the taints. So the taints, they're interesting because they're our deep obsessions. They're the deep obsessions of the mind, the last things that get uprooted out of the mind. And that's our relationship to existence, and our views about existence, and our sensual desire. So that sensual desire, the thing that's been driving all of this throughout this sutta, this is the last, one of the last things that gets uprooted. So with the cessation with the destruction of taints, I directly knew as it actually is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. These are the taints. This is the origin of the taints. This is the cessation of the taints. This is the way leading to the cessation of the taints. When I knew and saw thus, my mind was liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. So that's the views about existence. When it was liberated, there came the knowledge, it is liberated. I knew directly. Birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, and what had to be done has been done, and there is no more coming to any state of being. This was the third true knowledge attained by me in the last watch of the night. I recall teaching the Dharma to an assembly of many hundreds, and even then, each person thinks of me, the recluse Gautama is teaching the Dharma especially for me, but it should not be so regarded. The Tathagata teaches the Dharma to others only to give them knowledge. When the talk is finished, Agavasana, then I steady my mind internally, quieten it, bring it to singleness, and concentrate it on that same sign of collectedness as before, in which I constantly abide. So the Buddha is describing a state of mind that he returns to once the process of teaching, the engaging with the teaching and with the students, has been completed. This is a matter about which Master Gautama can be trusted as an accomplished and fully enlightened one should be. But does Master Gautama recall sleeping during the day? So even now, Agavasana is not convinced. I recall Agavasana in the last month of the hot season, on returning from my alms round after my meal, I laid out my outer robe, folded in four, and lying down on my right side, I fall asleep, mindful and fully aware. Well, some recluses and Brahmins call that abiding in delusion, Master Gautama. So here's Agavasena again being very discourteous. It is not in such a way that one is deluded or undeluded, Agavasena. As to how one is deluded or undeluded, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, sir, Saccaka, the Nagantha's son, replied. The Blessed One said this: Him I call deluded, Agavasana, who has not abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. For it is with the abandoning of the taints. Remember, that's about the nature of holding on to existence. Yeah. The views about existence itself and sensual desire. It is with the non-abandoning of the taints that one is deluded. Him I call undeluded, who has abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. For it is with the abandoning of the taints that one is undeluded. The Tathagata Agavasena has abandoned the taints that defile, bring renewal of being, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. He has cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Just as a palm tree whose crown is cut off is incapable of further growth, so too the Tathagata has abandoned the taints that defile, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Now, when this was said, Saccaka, the Nagantha's son, said, It is wonderful, Master Gautama, it is marvelous how, when Master Gautama is spoken to offensively, again and again, assailed by discourteous courses of speech, the color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as is to be expected of one who is accomplished and fully enlightened. I recall Master Gautama engaging Purana Kassapa in debate, and then he prevaricated, led the talk aside, and showed anger, hate, and bitterness. But the Master Gotama is spoken to offensively again and again, assaulted by discourteous courses of speech. The color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as is to be expected by one who is accomplished by fully enlightened. And he went on to recall lots of other teachers that he treated in the same way. Makali Gosila, Ajita Kesakambalin, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanyaya Balathiputta, and Nigantha Nataputta in debate. And they all prevaricated, led the talk aside, and showed anger, hate, and bitterness. But this is not so with Master Gotama. Now is the time. And now, Master Gotama, we depart. We are busy and have much to do. Now is the time, Agavasena, to do as you think fit. When Saccaka, the Nigantha's son, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words, got up from his seat and departed. So, what do we take from this? That mortifying the body is not a route to understanding. That if we want to be able to work with pleasurable states of mind, then developing the body is necessary in order to bring that into balance. And when we're working with unpleasant states, then developing the mind helps and supports the process of bringing that into balance. And then unless we develop the body and develop the mind, we don't develop the environment where the two sticks are dry and fire can be made. And so we need to recognize that the body has a lot to tell us. It's a feedback mechanism that informs us about what's going on. Largely speaking, it doesn't lie. It keeps a record of what's going on in past experiences as well as present ones. It responds to anticipation. So we can think of something about to happen in the future, and we'll feel a response in the body. So we need to develop this language of listening to the body in the same way as we develop the language of listening to the mind, and bring both of those together through the working of right effort. So when Bhante Ramsey described right effort as recognizing when the mind has been distracted away from the object of attention, okay, releasing away from that distraction. Well, part of that distraction can be a somatic experience. It can be a sensation in the body. Because remember that when the mind has been distracted, there are 5 external senses and 1 internal sense that could be the origin of that distraction. And if we get angry, we have a response in the body. And Bhante Ramsey used to describe that if we're dealing with, for instance, fear, then we need to address the tension in the body before we address the tension in the mind. So it's very important that we develop this literacy of what is going on in the body, not to the point of getting distracted, but to the point of being informed. And that we develop the same literacy about what's going on in the mind, because we need both of those to be present to create, if you like, the dry sticks in which to create the fire of the practice. So just, excuse me, sit comfortably. Let's just set up the conditions for practice. So softly rotate your inner thighs. That's that sort of medial rotation of the thighs to relax your hips out. It's a very small movement, Let the sacrum open, let the front of the pelvis release. Drop the inner edge of the shoulder blades. Let your spine relax out. Gently smile, releasing your neck. Relax the crown of your head and around your brain. Let your body come back into balance. Balance is this expression in the body where tension has been released. So this is a wholesome state. Tension is where there's craving. So when we've got an uncomfortable feeling, if we fight that uncomfortable feeling, we'll create dukkha, our suffering. We need to accept an uncomfortable feeling in the body or in the mind. And to accept an uncomfortable feeling, we need to soften around the edges. It's the edges of the feeling where our relationship to the feeling is expressed. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Do we want it? Do we not want it? We're not in charge of whether the feeling itself stays or disappears. But we can be in control of our response to that feeling being there. And that's what we want to turn to acceptance. And we do that by softening around the edges of the feeling in the body, restoring the sense of space in the body and in the mind, allowing the body to come back into balance, softly smiling. So however you are right now, allow yourself to do that. Bring up your object of meditation, whatever it is, whichever Brahma Vihara you're working with, or if you're working with the breath. And then don't overstrive. We can work too hard in the meditation. We need to take it easy. And that doesn't mean being lazy. It means letting your mind open, letting your body relax and be spacious, allowing balance to be present in your body, in your mind. And then simply observe what is going on. Now feel the sense of contact with the ground. Take a deliberate breath in and out, and then softly and gently open your eyes. And let's just open this out to any comment that you'd like to add from what you've heard or from your own practice. So, hello, Paul. Very good to see you. How are you doing?
Doing okay, thank you. Thanks for the talk.
And how do you feel about the emphasis on the body as well as on the mind?
Could you say a bit more about being in balance? How do you know if you're in balance?
Well, when we're working with the Saccaka, we're working with the energetic body. And so the energetic body allows us to deeply relax the physical body. We don't have to discriminate about what is good tension or unhelpful tension because the energetic body itself supports us. So then balance is releasing all the tension that we can see and allowing the energetic body to bring us back into that balance. And when that happens, the mind becomes soft and opens. So that's, for me, is one area where working with the Saccaka yoga is really helpful to discriminate around what is balance and what isn't.
Thank you.
Okay, NP, you have your hand up, please.
So I want to, if you could correct me, my understanding. I understand there's the connection between body and mind. So when I deeply relax my body, am I right in thinking naturally I calm my mind, therefore naturally I am releasing the tension in the body, so therefore my mind becomes calm, therefore my mind moves into jhanas.
Okay, so this is a very good point. And it comes down to the nature of the 6 R's and right effort. So the 6 R's are kind of broken down into 2 sections. Recognizing the mind has been distracted, releasing away from that distraction and relaxing any tension we notice around our brain or in our body. Now that's a purification of the mind. But then we need to retrain the mind, which means we need to bring up the wholesome, which is the smile and the Brahma Vihara, and then persist with the wholesome by maintaining the loving kindness or whichever Brahma Vihara we're working with. So this then completes all the 4 stages of right effort, which is, recognizing the unwholesome is there, releasing away from the wholesome, bringing the wholesome up and keeping the wholesome going. That's one way of looking at right effort. So it's not just enough to relax. If we just relax or just do the release and relax, we don't retrain the mind. Yes, we can move into very calm states, but we don't build the understanding. And the understanding comes from all 4 stages of right effort, comes from all of the 6 R's. And so it's important to have both components in the 6 R's together so that retraining is taking place. And then, rather than just relaxing and just relaxing and just relaxing, we then see the whole pattern behind how the distraction arises, what causes it to persist, what causes it to go away, and how we then keep it away, if you like, by the maintenance of our awareness on the object of attention. So it's important to have the whole of the practice together. So one of the things, and Bhante Dhamma is very clear on this, because he described his own practice at one stage being a process of releasing and relaxing. And what he noticed is he was able to develop the capacity to sit for very long periods. But when he came out of the practice and after 2 or 3 days or whatever, he noticed that the hindrances just started to come back again, because he wasn't maintaining that degree of releasing and relaxing. Excuse me. When we work with the whole of the 6 R's, we're building a relationship to the hindrances, which shows us how they operate, so that then we can take that into daily life And we don't need just to maintain the calm state of mind to keep them from coming out. We're using them as our teachers, because when they arise, they're showing us when our attachments and aversions are and how then to respond to those. And as we get used to doing that in our formal meditation practice, then we begin to extend it out into daily life.
Yeah, so that's where the loving kindness and the smiling comes into
That's right.
play.
Yeah. The smiling and coming back to the loving kindness are really important components of right effort, not just the relax. The relax is an important stage, relax, but smile and return.
Yes,
Very
thank
good.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hugh, could I ask you another second question, if
Of
I
course.
may, please? Is my understanding correct? When I'm not practicing Siksha, the dependent origination works or flows, and when I practice 6R, I am interrupting that flow on one of the links, let's say at feeling a link. Am I right in understanding that?
Well, the dependent origination is a description of a natural law. And if we leave it, as you described, uninterrupted, then we notice that we move from feeling, contact to feeling, to craving, to clinging, to our habitual responses and the rest of it.
Yes, suffering, yeah.
But if we interrupt it, then what we notice is that we move into the transcendental dependent origination. So we go from the mundane dependent origination into the transcendental, which is that we see that we're interrupting the process of ignorance, and we're developing true knowledge and the rest of it, because we're releasing away from the craving or the clinging or the habitual responses. So dependent origination continues to work. It's just that if we practice, we move it from the, if you like, the mundane dependent origination into the transcendental, because we then begin to see. So the 6 R's, for instance, as we release, we relax and we smile. The relaxed stage is the releasing of craving. So in that moment, we see the transcendental dependent origination happen, because we see craving disappear. And with the release of craving, we see dukkha disappears. So the process of dependent origination continues, but we've interrupted it from the mundane into more towards the transcendental.
Thank you very much. So am I right in thinking that when I'm not practicing Siksha, the dependent origination flows, and when I'm practicing Siksha, I'm interrupting that flow, and when I'm practicing 6R and when I'm in jhanas, that 6R naturally works, interrupting that dependent origination flow.
Okay, so when we're in jhanas, the hindrances are not present. And then when we get, when we're distracted in the jhana to the point where we need to use the 6 R's, remember there are incidental sort of interruptions in the jhanas which we can just ignore because we're still present with the object of attention. But if we get drawn out of that object of attention completely, then in that moment we're out of the jhana. And once we're out of the jhana, the process of dependent origination is there to see the mundane, and we 6R that, and then that releases the hindrance, and that enables us to come back into the jhana itself. And So when we're working with the practice, we're in the body of the dependent origination all of the time, and seeing that process, we can see whether we can see contact arising. So if we're in one of the high stages of jhana, we might be our awareness might be refined enough to see contact arising. Okay, well, seeing contact arising is seeing dependent origination. It's an aspect of dependent origination. So in the jhanas, we still have dependent origination happening, but it's not happening to the point where it's distracting us. And as our practice develops, we can see the nature of what happens. We can see the impersonality of contact arising. We can see the impersonality of feeling arising. Yeah, these are not under our control. And then if we're really present, we can release away, because the 6 R's have become relatively automatic, we can release away from the craving arising, because as feeling arises or as contact arises, we're letting go. We're releasing at that point. But it's not that there isn't dependent origination in the jhanas. Yes, there is. But it's not taking us to the point where it's taking us out of the jhana.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just wanted to be clear. You're saying dependent origination is working all the time or flowing all the time. Even when I'm in higher jhanas, dependent origination flows. But because my 6 are being autopilot, it interrupts.
It interrupts the mundane dependent origination. See, dependent origination is a condition. Wherever circumstances are conditioned, there'll be dependent origination. Because conditioned circumstances means that when this arises, that comes to be. When this ceases, that ceases. So another name for dependent origination is conditioned genesis. And all of the jhanas are conditioned states. So dependent origination must be in those conditioned states. It's only in nibbana, the unconditioned, that dependent origination does not occur.
Okay, thank you very much. It's
All right.
brilliant to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. So, Ravi, how are you doing?
Hello, Hugh. I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've got a cough, which I haven't thrown off
Yes,
since
I noticed.
I've come back from India, but I don't think it's making me ill anymore. It just sounds a lot worse than it is.
Okay. Thank you for the talk.
Okay. How do you feel about the mind and the body, the importance of both?
Yeah. So it was interesting to hear the distinction that the pleasant feeling is weakness of body and the unpleasant feeling points to the weakness of the mind. That is completely new information for me.
Yes, it's a very interesting sort of this, and I think rather than think of it as weakness, I think what I'd say is the way we can address it is through the development of the body, seeing at the impact it has, and knowing how to bring the body into balance, knowing how to bring the mind into balance. So, the Buddha is very clear. Even after being a bodhisattva and then becoming the Buddha, pleasant and unpleasant are still present. And so the invitation is, how do we respond to the pleasant and how do we respond to the unpleasant? And this idea of using both together, I think, is very strong. And it enables us then not to be frightened of our body, but to be curious about how it can support us in the practice, in the same way that we shouldn't be frightened about our mind, but recognize that there are patterns in the mind that we can come to see and understand. And the patterns in the body are exactly the same. So I think personally speaking, I think this is a very helpful perspective. Otherwise, we tend to be too much up in the mind, trying to control everything from here. And there's a whole language and feedback mechanism that's available in the body that can support us. So if we think, excuse me, if we think about the teaching about the elements that is often present in the Buddhist suttas, the elements, the earth, wind, fire, water, these are all somatic elements. They're all elements in the body. It's only the space. This can be in the mind and in the body. And then the sixth element is consciousness, which is clearly mind. So if we're going to allow the elements to be part of the practice, we also need to be familiar with the language of the body's response to the elements. Thank you.
Thank you. So personally for me, when I'm rooted in body slightly well, then my concentration lasts longer. Otherwise, usually the attention span is like 2 to 3 seconds, 4 seconds. But when I stay with the breathing and earth element or the sense of the inner body, then I could count up to 10 and go back from 10 to 1.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things going on here. Some of the bodily sensations are very clear to see, and so they're easier to concentrate on, if you like. One we're looking for in the TWIM approach is this collectedness of mind. Now, the collectedness means to be observing of all that goes on. And then when we're being collected, the being aware of the body in its totality is a very helpful thing to see, because we can see changes in the body and we can 6R, as well as we can see changes in the mind and we can 6R. And remember that when we work with the Brahma Viharas, so you might be familiar with a breath meditation, or you might be from other traditions of scanning through the body, for instance. When we're working with the Brahma Viharas, we're not working, just with a sort of mental idea of loving kindness. We're actually working with the sensation of loving kindness. And the sensation of loving kindness can be very variable between people. But it has certain characteristics which are, quite often present. So a sense of lightness, a sense of expansiveness, a sense of openness, sometimes a sense of warmth, but not always. So there are physical sensations associated with the loving kindness that we can also use as our object of attention, just being aware that they are there. Now, it's very important that we just have that awareness, not to concentrate on them. So we might feel a sense of warmth. Now, if we concentrate on the sense of warmth, we don't want that feeling to disappear, because that's our object of attention. And that's going to keep us stuck. So we don't meditate on the attribute of the loving kindness. We just meditate on the awareness that that feeling is there, because as our practice develops, that feeling is going to change. And if we've used one attribute as our focus, we don't want that to change, because we're focusing on it. And so when we keep this wide mind and this soft awareness, then we become aware when the attributes begin to change of themselves. And there's a natural consequence here. We move from the loving kindness to the compassion, to the sympathetic joy, and then to the equanimity. And each of those and their transitions have different attributes. And so we can still work through the physical body, working with these different things right up to equanimity. That's fourth jhana. And then we move into the arupa jhanas. So then the sensation of the body becomes much less, and mentality is taking over. But the body still has a role to play. And the role it has to play is when we get caught, when we get pulled out of the jhāna, then the body's back again. And that awareness can then help us release away from what's distracted us and take us back into the arupa jhāna. So the body remains a helpful tool, but its attributes don't become part of the meditation in the later stages until we get kicked out and need to return.
Yes, thank you. I haven't gone that far up to Arupa jhanas, but it's a good note by you. So I'll keep it in mind. Also, when I did the retreat, I definitely understood the difference between the idea of loving kindness and the sensation of it. Because when it was the last day, people were sending me loving kindness, and I could actually feel it, what it feels like.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's certainly a lovely experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done. Good. Yogesh, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
And how did you find the talk?
Well, talk about you very useful. But there is one point where actually I would like to understand more. That the pleasant feeling has to be for the pleasant feeling, body has to be developed. So when there is a pleasant feeling, the body is already very light. Is like a earth element is very soft, is very light, and sometimes there is no tension which is coming up for a long time also. So how to develop the body in that sense?
Okay, so when there's pleasant feeling, the body can be very light, it can be very soft, it can feel very expansive. Okay, well, the first thing is to recognize that that's what's happened in the body, that the body does feel that it does feel like that, and not to hold on to it. Okay, so when we find that our body begins to go into that state, we tend to take an ownership of it, and that ownership might be, the meditation's going really well. It's and my body's feeling very comfortable, and all of this dialogue, and we need to 6R those just as much as we might do with an uncomfortable feeling, because it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant that we're working with. We're not preferring one thing over the other. So we're sitting there and we feel expansive. Simply know that that's what's going on. So just like when we're working with perhaps the loving kindness, and we've got this feeling which is expanding, we don't get caught up with the feeling of it. We're just present with the knowing that it's doing that. And if we just know that the body is feeling this way, and then relax, and if we're working with the Saccaka yoga with the energetic support, we can relax into the energetic support. And so we don't own the sensation, the comfortable feeling. We just recognize it's there and come back, because it's about acceptance. And acceptance means that the mind and the body remain expansive and spacious, irrespective of what's going on. Okay, so if we've got an uncomfortable feeling, we can feel ourselves wanting to tighten up and restrict, and we need to soften around the edges. Okay, when we feel expansive, we soften around the edges of that expansive feeling and just let it be there. Don't hold on to it, because all of these feelings are going to transition. And the comfortable ones we can subtly hold on to. And we need to be able to allow ourselves to let those simply be there for however long they are, when the conditions are right for them to be there. And when those conditions change, they release. So the pleasant arises for a while, and then conditions change. And we have to watch whether we feel resentful about the pleasant disappearing. And when the pleasant's disappearing, we see the tension in the mind, and we need to soften that out. When there's pleasure in the body, we can see that subtle attention, subtle holding on to the pleasant feeling, perhaps a sense of pride, a sense of enjoyment, and relax into the energetic support.
Right.
Okay, and just keep allowing yourself to relax into that support. So you notice it's there and you come back. When it's uncomfortable, you soften around the edges and relax back into the energetic support.
Right. Thank you. I think
give that a go and let me know how you get on. Yeah.
So the last point is very helpful. Come back to the energy.
Okay.
Energy support. That is where.
Yeah, I can't quite hear you there. Have you got a second question you'd like to ask?
That's it. That's it.
Okay. All right. Raju, how are you getting on? Is there anything you'd like to add? No? Feel free to leave a message in the chat. Okay, and Alison, anything you'd like to add from?
No, I don't think I've anything to add. I need to say it's been really interesting also listening to the questions and what that's brought out about how everything ties into the twin process and the dependent origination, etc. It's been, yeah, really interesting, but nothing more to add. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and Sachin, I think you're logged in as SVT. Anything you'd like to add?
Hi, Hugh. Actually, he went out.
It's Sindhu.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so well, thank you very much, everyone. So let's just finish by sharing merit. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit with we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.